My name is Sarah Jenkins, and if you had met me in my early 30s, you probably would have just seen another tired waitress in a small town diner, refilling coffee and forcing a smile through aching feet and overdue bills. I used to think my life was going to be nothing but double shifts, second-hand shoes, and worrying over the next electric bill. I never imagined that one quiet act of kindness in a nearly empty diner would circle back to me 10 years later in a way that still makes my hands shake when I talk about it. Back then, I was 32, a widow, and the sole provider for my 8-year-old son, Tommy. We lived in a cramped, 2-bedroom rental in a worn-out part of a small Ohio town. The kind of place where the houses leaned just a little and the paint peeled from the porches like they were tired too. Our home smelled like old carpet and whatever cheap candles were on sale that week. My pride and joy was a faded drawing Tommy made of a little blue house with a white porch swing. He taped it to the fridge and labeled it our future home. I used to smile when I saw it, then quietly wonder how on earth I was ever going to afford something like that. I worked at Betty's Diner on Route 27, a place that had been there so long it felt like it had grown out of the asphalt itself. The sign outside buzzed and flickered, and the red vinyl booths inside had that sticky feel no amount of scrubbing could completely fix. But it was honest work. I knew the regulars by name, and they knew me. They knew that if they came in on a Tuesday morning, I'd remember how they liked their eggs or whether they took cream in their coffee. That diner, tired as it was, kept us afloat. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon in late October when she came in, Lisa Harper. At the time, I didn't know her name. I just saw a young woman, probably late 20s, soaked through, her hair plastered to her forehead, pushing open the door with one hand while the other tried to wrangle 2 little girls who looked about 5 and 3. The older one clutched a stuffed rabbit by the ear, and the younger one had mismatched socks and big, confused eyes. I remember the bell over the door chiming and the cold air sweeping in behind them. The diner was almost empty, just a trucker half asleep in a corner booth and an older couple sharing pie. The young woman apologized as she tried to brush raindrops off the girls' jackets. "Sorry," she said, out of breath. They were hungry. We needed to stop. "Don't worry about it," I told her, grabbing a stack of menus. "You're fine. Come on in and warm up." She guided the girls into a booth by the window. The older one scooted all the way in and pressed her nose to the glass, fogging it with her breath. The little one climbed onto the seat and immediately started drumming her heels against the vinyl. "What's your name, sweetheart?" I asked, setting down the menus. "Mia," the older one said, not bothering to look away from the window. "I'm Ellie," the younger one chirped, then added, "I like pancakes." Their mother let out a small laugh that sounded more like a sigh. "I'm Lisa," she said. Dark circles sat beneath her eyes, and her coat looked one wash away from unraveling. We were kind of on a tight budget, so maybe just pancakes to split. She dug into her bag and pulled out a worn little wallet, then spilled a handful of coins into her palm. Her fingers trembled as she counted. "I think we can manage 3 short stacks. No drinks. Tap water is fine." I looked at the coins. Nickels, dimes, a few quarters, and one crumpled $5 bill she pulled from a side pocket. That was it. I'd seen that look before, the one where a grown adult is doing math in their head so hard, you can practically feel it. I recognized it because it lived in my own bathroom mirror. I smiled and said, "You know what? Let's get these girls some real pancakes. I'll put in the order and bring you coffee." She shook her head quickly. No, coffee is okay. I don't argue with a woman holding a coffee pot," I teased lightly. "House rule." Her shoulders dropped a little, and I watched some of the panic leave her face as I walked away. In the kitchen, I grabbed an order ticket and wrote out 3 stacks of pancakes, extra syrup, 2 chocolate milks, 1 coffee, extra bacon. I hesitated a moment, eyeing the total in my head, then took a deep breath. It had been a decent morning, and my tips were tucked under the register. I'd had my eye on a second-hand coat for Tommy that week, and this would eat a chunk of that. But something about the way Lisa's fingers shook over those coins, it hit me right in the chest. I turned to my cook, Roy. "Put it all on my check," I said quietly. Roy raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "Yeah," I nodded. "I'm sure." When I brought the plates out, the girls' faces lit up like it was Christmas morning. Ellie actually clapped her hands when she saw the chocolate milk. Lisa blinked as the steam rose from the pancakes. "I think there's a mistake," she said, her voice tight. We didn't order all this." I set down the coffee in front of her and leaned an elbow on the table. "Sometimes," I said gently, "the kitchen makes good mistakes. Don't worry about it." She glanced at the plates, then at me, then at her daughters. "I don't know how to. Just let them eat while it's hot," I interrupted with a small smile. "You can thank me later by having a better day than the one you walked in with." She stared at me for a long second, eyes filling with tears, then looked away quickly and sniffed. "Girls, say thank you," she ordered, clearing her throat. "Thank you," Mia and Ellie chorused, their mouths already full. I gave them a little bow and walked away as they dug in. The 3 of them stayed longer than most customers would for lunch. Rain kept coming down outside in a steady gray curtain, turning the parking lot into a sheet of slick black. Lisa relaxed little by little as the girls' energy shifted from frantic hunger to giggly contentment. I watched her shoulders soften, watched the way she kept glancing at them like she was afraid they'd vanish. When I came by to refill her coffee, she touched my arm. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm not usually like this. It's just been a month." "Trust me," I said, sliding the coffee pot away. "I get it. I'm Sarah, by the way." "Sarah," she repeated, like she wanted to memorize it. "I'm Lisa. We just moved to this town. I lost my job 2 weeks ago. I thought I had enough for the kids to eat," but she swallowed hard. "Rent was due. The car needed gas. You know how it is." "Oh, I know," I replied. "I lost my husband when my son was 6. Whole world turned upside down overnight. There were a lot of nights where he pretended he wasn't hungry, and I pretended I believed him. Sometimes you just need someone to help you get through one day so you can figure out the next one." She gave a shaky laugh. "You just described my life in one sentence." She looked at me, really looked at me, like maybe it was the first time that week anyone had. "I don't have anything extra to give you. I wish I did." "You gave me your story," I said. "That's something." Wiped her eyes and reached into her bag again, pulling out a pen and a folded napkin. She scribbled something on it and slid it over to me. "I know this sounds silly," she said, "but if I ever get out of this, if I ever make it, I'm going to pay you back. With interest, I swear. This is my number. If you ever need anything, please call me." I looked down at the napkin. It had her name, Lisa Harper, and a phone number, along with 3 words in small handwriting. "I won't forget." "You don't owe me anything," I said, tucking the napkin into my apron pocket. "Kindness isn't a loan." "Maybe not," she said softly, "but I still want to pay it forward, for you, for someone, for all of this." She gestured vaguely around the diner. They left about an hour later. The rain had lightened to drizzle, and the girls waved at me through the window as they climbed into an old navy blue sedan with a dented bumper. Lisa started the engine, then looked back at the diner for a moment before pulling away. I watched their taillights disappear down the road, then reached into my apron and pressed my fingers against the folded napkin. I should have called her. I should have at least texted. But life had its own plans, Lincoln just became another thing I intended to get to someday. The years that followed weren't particularly kind to me, but they weren't all bad either. That's the funny thing about midlife. You get used to holding two truths in your hands at the same time. I watched Tommy grow taller than me, his shoulders broadening, his face losing its baby softness. He took a part-time job at the hardware store at 16, saved up for his first beater car, and talked about getting out the way kids do in small towns. I kept working at Betty S., though Betty herself eventually retired and sold the place to a younger couple who had big ideas and limited patience. They swapped out the old floral curtains for slick blinds, took down the faded pictures of old regulars on the wall, and changed the menu just enough to confuse everyone. They kept me on, but the pay didn't get any better, and the new owners expected smiles, even when the tips were thin and the customers rude. I dated a little. One guy, Mark, was a real estate agent who seemed promising. He'd pick me up in pressed shirts and talk about lake houses and retirement plans. For a while, I imagined myself in those houses, sitting on a balcony with a glass of iced tea, watching the sun set over the water. But once he realized my idea of a splurge was buying a name brand cereal instead of the generic one, he started canceling dates. Eventually, he just stopped calling. I didn't chase him. People like that make their choices, and life has a way of circling back around to teach them what really matters. At 38, everything almost fell apart in one snowy night. It was late January, one of those bitter Ohio nights when the cold settles in your bones and refuses to leave. I was driving home after a closing shift, my old Chevy trailing a cloud of exhaust down the slick 2-lane road that led from the diner to my rental. Snowflakes spun in the headlights, hypnotic and thick. The radio crackled with static and Christmas music, even though the holidays were long over. As I turned onto a curve, my tires hit a patch of ice. The car fishtailed, and my heart jumped into my throat. I gripped the wheel, but it was like trying to hold onto a greased rope. The world spun 1, 2, 3 times, and then the car slammed sideways into a guardrail with a screech of metal that sounded like the world itself was tearing. When everything stopped moving, I realized my chest was pressed hard against the seatbelt, and my breath came in shallow little gasps. The airbag had deployed, and the smell of burnt chemicals filled the car. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then the pain rolled in sharp lightning down my neck, a dull ache in my shoulder, the sting of my forehead where it had hit something. Later, in the emergency room, a nurse helped me onto a bed and asked me my name, my date of birth, if I knew what day it was. I answered on autopilot, my mind somewhere between the flickering fluorescent lights and the rising tide of panic as I imagined the bill that was about to follow this visit. X-rays, scans, a neck brace, a night on a thin mattress with a curtain that didn't quite close all the way. Each little thing felt like another digit on a bill I couldn't afford. Thankfully, nothing was broken. I walked away with bruises, whiplash, a prescription for pain medication, and a list of follow-up appointments that would eventually cost more than the car had ever been worth. The Chevy was totaled. Insurance covered some of it, but not enough. I borrowed a car from my sister for a while, but every mile I put on it felt like another favor I owed. The medical bills started arriving in the mail about a month later, thick white envelopes stacked alongside the usual collection of coupons and junk. I'd stand at the kitchen counter, leaning on one hip, opening them one by one as my stomach twisted. Each bill was a neat little summary of the night my life spun out of control, written in codes and numbers, and cold in different language. There was no code for terrified widow, no line item for still trying her best. I picked up more shifts at the diner where I could, worked lunches and dinners back to back. I skipped my own doctor appointments to save money. I cut the cable, fought with the electric company over payment plans, pretended I wasn't exhausted. Tommy, now in his late teens, noticed the way my shoulders sagged and the deep lines forming around my mouth, but he didn't know the full picture. I wanted him to be a kid for a little longer, even if he was nearly grown. When he announced, at 18, that he wanted to enlist in the army, I had a hard time breathing for reasons that had nothing to do with car accidents or medical debt. "Mom, it's steady money," he said, sitting at our chipped kitchen table with his hands wrapped around a mug of instant coffee. "I'll get training, benefits, a chance to see something besides this town. I'll be okay." I wanted to tell him no. I wanted to forbid it. But I also knew what it felt like to be stuck and scared and staring at the same walls year after year. So I swallowed my fear and nodded. "If this is what you really want, I'm not going to stand in your way," I said, "but I reserve the right to worry." He laughed and hugged me so tight I thought my ribs might crack. "You'd worry if I went to college down the street," he said. He wasn't wrong. When he finally shipped out, the house felt too quiet. His bedroom still smelled faintly of cheap cologne and laundry detergent, and his posters of rock bands and movie heroes stared down at me with knowing eyes. I stood in the doorway that first night and realized I had no one to cook for, no one to trip over in the hallway, no one to tell to clean up their socks. I had spent so long being Tommy's mom that I wasn't entirely sure who Sarah was anymore. The loneliness settled in like a fog. It was during that season, the one where I was alone in the house, working too much, sleeping too little, that the lump appeared. I found it one afternoon in the shower, my fingers brushing against a small, hard knot where there hadn't been one before. For a moment, everything inside me went still. The sound of the water faded, the steam seemed to thin, and there was just my hand, my skin, and that unfamiliar shape under it. I didn't tell anyone at first. I finished my shower, got dressed, went to work. I poured coffee and cleared plates, and smiled until my cheeks hurt. At night, when I lay down in my narrow bed, I'd slide my fingers under the fabric of my old t-shirt and press against that spot, half hoping it would be gone, half afraid it had grown. Eventually, I made an appointment. Then another. Mammograms, ultrasounds, biopsies. Waiting rooms with magazines 3 months out of date. Other women sitting with pursed lips and knitted brows. The quiet hum of an old television in the corner. Every minute felt like an hour, every hour like a week. When the doctor finally told me it was benign, I laughed out loud in his office. The sound surprised even me. Relief washed through me so fast it made me dizzy. I thanked him, shook his hand too many times, and then walked out to my car, sat behind the wheel, and sobbed until my chest ached. It wasn't cancer. I wasn't dying. But the bills from that little scare were enough to knock the wind out of my bank account all over again. I picked up extra shifts again. I canceled my own small luxuries. No more occasional bookstore trips. No more Sunday breakfast splurges. I kept the lights on and the rent paid, just barely. By the time I turned 42, the landlord had raised the rent twice, and my aging body couldn't keep up with the same pace I'd kept in my 20s. My knees complained, my back grumbled, and my fingers sometimes went numb after carrying too many heavy trays. It was the year I fell behind for the first time. It started with the electric bill. A late notice, then a final notice. I called and begged for an extension. I sent what I could, promised the rest next week. Then the rent slipped. The landlord, an older man who had once been surprisingly kind when I first moved in, had since passed the property to his son, who treated it like a business and nothing more. "I'm sorry, Miss Jenkins," he said over the phone one afternoon, his voice flat. "I gave you 30 days. I can't give more. I have to think about my own family too." I wanted to scream that my family mattered too, that I had spent my life serving people like him breakfast and coffee and kindness they rarely saw. Instead, I took a steadying breath and said, "I understand." When the eviction notice came, I held it in my hands like it was written in another language. I sat at my small kitchen table and read the words over and over. I had 30 days to leave. 30 days to figure out where to put the boxes of memories, the thrift store furniture, the worn-out couch where Tommy had fallen asleep so many nights watching TV. I stayed with my sister, Ruth, after that. She had a small house on the other side of town, neater than mine had ever been. She was the type who ironed her dish towels and polished her silverware, even if no one was coming over. Ruth let me sleep in her guest room, but her tolerance had its limits. "You can stay as long as you need, but you've got to figure things out," she said one night over meatloaf. "You're not getting any younger, Sarah." "I'm working on it," I replied, even though I had no clue what it was supposed to be. I started helping at the local food bank on my days off, partly because I knew what it felt like to be on the other side of that counter, and partly because I needed to feel useful in some way that didn't involve a uniform and a name tag. I handed out canned goods and pasta and boxes of cereal to women who looked disturbingly like me, tired, worn, polite, but embarrassed. I'd smile and say, "Take an extra box if you need it," and they'd sometimes cry or sometimes look down and just nod. Life in my late 40s wasn't what I had pictured. When I was younger, I had imagined being settled by then. Maybe remarried. Maybe in a small house with fresh paint and a porch swing, watching grandkids play in the yard. Instead, I was sleeping in my sister's guest room, rolling my clothes into neat lines in a battered suitcase because I didn't want to take up too much space in her closet. There were nights when I lay awake staring at the ceiling and wondered if that $20 I'd given to Lisa years ago was foolish. Not because I regretted helping her, never that, but because I realized how thin my own margin had always been. I had given out of my need, not my abundance. Sometimes that felt noble. Sometimes it felt foolish. And sometimes, when my back hurt and my bank account hovered near zero, it felt like both at the same time. Still, I never threw away that napkin. It lived in the top drawer of my nightstand, tucked inside an old paperback book I'd read a dozen times. Whenever I moved, it came with me, folded and refolded so often the edges had started to fray. Sometimes, on bad days, I'd take it out and trace my finger over the words I won't forget. It was like a tiny reminder that once my kindness had mattered to someone. I didn't know where Lisa was. I didn't know if she had ever made it the way she'd hoped. For all I knew, she could have moved away, or gotten remarried, or never thought of me again. Life had a way of scattering people like leaves on a windy day. By the time I turned 52, my hair had more gray in it than brown, and my hands had the faint, scattered freckles my mother's used to have. Days were simple. Work, sleep, volunteer when I could, call Tommy when he had a good signal and a free half hour. I had stopped daring to dream of anything big. The porch swing house, the garden, the quiet mornings with coffee and no rush, it all felt like something meant for other people. And then, on a rainy Tuesday, because apparently life likes a good theme, I got a phone call that changed everything. The rain that day came down in steady sheets, drumming softly against the windows of my sister's house. I was sitting at her kitchen table, still in my diner uniform, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone lukewarm while I stared at the classifieds in the local paper. I wasn't really reading them. My eyes just moved over the words while my mind wandered through the usual maze of worries. The phone on the wall rang, its shrill sound cutting through the quiet. Ruth called from the living room. "Sarah, can you get that?" I pushed my chair back and picked up the receiver. "Hello, is this Sarah Jenkins?" A woman's voice asked. Her tone was polite, professional, the kind that came from someone used to making calls that changed people's days. "Yes, this is she," I said, straightening a little. "My name is Karen Holloway," she said. "I'm a real estate agent with Holloway and Sons Realty. I'm calling to confirm some information with you. Do you have a moment?" My heart dropped straight into my stomach. I thought for a split second that somehow this was about debt, or missed payments, or some new problem I didn't know I had. I guess," I replied cautiously. "What's this about?" "I have a property here that has been fully transferred into your name," she said, rustling papers. "I just need to verify that we have the correct person. Are you the same Sarah Jenkins who worked at Betty's Diner on Route 27 some years ago?" I blinked. "Yes, I did work there," I said slowly. "But I don't own any property." "That's what I'd like to clear up," she continued. "We have a deed here for a 2-bedroom craftsman bungalow on Willow Lane, fully paid off, no mortgage. The buyer requested it be transferred directly into your name. There's also a note attached asking that you be contacted as soon as possible to arrange key pickup and a walkthrough." I actually laughed. It came out sharp and unsure. "Ma'am, I think you have the wrong person," I said. "I can't even afford my own apartment. I definitely don't own a house." "I thought there might be some confusion," she said gently. "But I have your full name, your birth date, and a note about a diner on Route 27. The instructions were very specific. The house is yours, Miss Jenkins, free and clear." I gripped the phone tighter. For a moment, I couldn't find my voice. I finally managed. I don't understand." "There's a letter for you at the property," she said. "If you'd like, we can meet there tomorrow so you can see it yourself. I'll bring all the paperwork. We can walk through everything." My knees went weak. I reached for the back of the chair with my free hand and sank into it. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, okay. I can be there tomorrow." We settled on a time. I hung up the phone slowly, my fingers numb, and stared at the worn linoleum floor like it might hold some answers if I looked long enough. Ruth walked into the kitchen, drying her hands on a towel. "Who was that?" she asked. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. "A real estate agent," I said. She said someone bought me a house." Ruth's eyebrows shot up. "Is this one of those scam calls?" she demanded. "Because you know they try to trick older women." "I don't know," I cut in. She knew my name. She knew about Betty's Diner. She knew things she shouldn't know if it was a scam. Ruth's skepticism didn't fade entirely, but she softened a little. "You're not going alone," she declared. "I'm coming with you." I didn't argue. That night, I lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling as the rain tapped softly against the window. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more unbelievable than the last. A clerical error, a cruel joke, some hidden relative I'd never heard of leaving me something in a will. The idea that someone had intentionally bought me a house felt too big, too generous, too impossible. And yet, there was a small, steady voice somewhere deep inside that whispered one name over and over. Lisa. The next day, the rain had cleared, leaving the world washed and bright. The sky was a pale, clean blue, and the air held that crisp smell you only get after a long storm. Ruth drove us across town, her hands gripping the steering wheel like she was personally responsible for getting us safely to the truth. Willow Lane was a quiet street lined with older homes, most of them with wide front porches and big trees whose roots had pushed the sidewalks up in gentle waves. Kids' bikes lay abandoned on a few lawns, and wind chimes tinkled softly in the breeze. It was the kind of neighborhood I used to walk through on my days off, just to look and dream. Karen, the realtor, stood on the sidewalk in front of a small house with a freshly painted white fence. She was in her 40s, with neat hair and a blazer that looked more expensive than my entire wardrobe. She smiled as we pulled up. "Miss Jenkins," she called as we got out of the car. "Yes," I said, smoothing my hand over my thrift store shirt, as if that might somehow make it more appropriate for the occasion. She reached out and shook my hand firmly. "It's nice to meet you in person," she said. She nodded politely at Ruth as well. "I know this is a lot to process, so I'll walk you through everything." I looked at the house. It wasn't huge, just a modest 2-bedroom craftsman with a deep front porch and a swing hanging from 2 thick chains on the left side. The siding was a soft, pale blue, and the trim was bright white. There were flower boxes under the windows, already filled with petunias and marigolds. A small stone path led from the sidewalk to the front steps. The whole place looked like something out of a brochure for simple living. My breath caught in my throat. The porch swing was almost exactly like the one in Tommy's childhood drawing, the drawing I had stared at so many nights, wondering if it would ever be more than fridge art. "Is this really mine?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "If you are Sarah Jenkins, born April 6th, 1973, who worked at Betty's Diner, and once served a woman named Lisa Harper," Karen said, pulling out a folder, "then yes, it's yours." My legs wobbled. Ruth slipped an arm through mine, steadying me. "Let's go inside," Karen suggested kindly. "There are some things you need to see." The front door was painted a cheerful red. Karen unlocked it and pushed it open, gesturing for us to step in first. The smell hit me immediately, not musty like an empty house, but warm and clean, with a hint of lemon and something like vanilla. Sunlight streamed through the front windows, illuminating a cozy living room. There was a soft gray couch, a wooden coffee table with a bowl of decorative stones, and a bookshelf along one wall filled with neatly arranged books and framed photos of landscapes and flowers. A woven rug covered part of the hardwood floor, and a lamp with a stained glass shade stood beside a reclining chair. It felt lived in already, like someone had thought about what it meant for a person to come home here. In the kitchen, stainless steel appliances gleamed alongside painted cabinets in a soft cream color. There were dishes in the cupboards, nice ones, not mismatched thrift store finds. A kettle sat on the stove. The refrigerator hummed quietly, and when I opened it, I saw that it was stocked with food. Milk, eggs, fresh vegetables, fruit, cheese, orange juice. The pantry beside it was filled with canned goods, pasta, rice, spices. There was even a bag of Tommy's favorite cereal brand, the one with the cartoon lion on the front. My throat tightened. "Who did this?" I whispered. Karen cleared her throat gently and pulled a white envelope from the folder she carried. My name was written on the front in neat, familiar handwriting. "Whoever paid for the house left this for you," she said. "I'll give you a moment." My hands shook as I took the envelope. Ruth and Karen both stepped back a little, giving me space, though I could feel their eyes on me. I slid a finger under the flap and opened it. Inside was a folded letter on simple stationery. I unfolded it slowly and began to read. "Dear Sarah, if you're reading this, then the universe finally allowed me to keep a promise I made 10 years ago in a tiny diner on a rainy day. You might not remember me right away, but I remember you. I will always remember you. My name is Lisa Harper. 10 years ago, I stumbled into Betty's Diner with my 2 little girls, broke in every way a person can be broke, financially, emotionally, spiritually. I had just enough money to get them something small to eat, and even that felt like a risky decision. You saw me, really saw me. You didn't just take my order. You noticed the shaking hands, the forced smile, the way I kept my shoulders squared so my girls wouldn't see how scared I was. You gave my daughters a real meal that day. You gave me coffee and warmth and a place to breathe. You paid for everything out of your own pocket when I couldn't. And then you did something even more important. You looked me in the eye and told me that kindness wasn't charity. You told me that sometimes we help people through one day so they can figure out how to survive the next one. You have no idea how badly I needed those words. That day changed my life more than you can possibly know. Left the diner feeling like maybe the world wasn't entirely against me. I still had a long road ahead of me. There were still late notices and nights I cried into my pillow. But that $20 act of kindness stuck with me. You didn't treat me like a burden. You treated me like a person who had value. I kept that napkin you let me write on, the one where I scribbled my name and number and the words, "I won't forget." I tucked it into my wallet and carried it with me for years. Every time things got hard, I'd look at it and remember that somewhere out there was a woman who believed I was worth a hot meal and a little hope. With time and a lot of hard work, things slowly started to change for us. I applied for a nursing assistant training program not long after that day in the diner. It terrified me, going back to school at my age, juggling classes with work and motherhood. But I pushed through. I worked nights at a different diner for a while, then got a job at a nursing home. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a step. The girls grew. They lost their baby faces and started rolling their eyes at my bad jokes. We moved into a slightly better apartment. I traded in the old sedan for something that didn't break down every other month. I kept going. Eventually, I earned my nursing degree. Then I worked at a hospital. Then I got promoted. Somewhere in there, I met a good man who loved my girls like they were his own. We built a life that at one time I didn't think I deserved. I thought about you often. Every time I saw a tired waitress, every time a woman in scrubs came in at the end of her shift and ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, every time I saw a mom counting coins at a checkout line, I saw my younger self in them. And I remembered you. I started my own little tradition. Whenever I could, I'd quietly pay for someone else's meal or groceries or gas. Sometimes I'd tell them why, but most of the time I didn't. I just hoped that one day it would come back around the way your kindness came back around to me. But there was one thing I never forgot, the promise I made on that napkin. I won't forget. I didn't know how to find you for a long time. Life kept moving. I got busier. The girls graduated. We moved. But that promise tugged at my heart like a loose thread I could never quite ignore. A while back, my oldest, Mia, now almost grown, found the napkin in an old jewelry box where I'd tucked it for safekeeping. She asked me who Sarah from Betty's Diner was, and I told her the whole story. I watched her eyes fill with tears. Ellie, too. "Mom," Mia said, "we have to find her. We have to thank her properly." So we did. We made some calls. We found out Betty's had changed owners, but one of the old regulars remembered you. We tracked down your son's name, then your sister S. We learned about the car accident, the medical bills, the eviction. Every new piece of information made my chest ache. You had given to us out of your need, not your excess. You had planted a seed in rocky soil and trusted that somehow it would grow. It did. Because of that meal, because of that kindness, because of the way you treated us like we mattered, I started to believe that I could build a different life for my girls. And I did. Now, because of you, my daughters grew up understanding that one person's small act can change the entire trajectory of someone else's life. This house is our way of keeping that promise. The day I cried over cold pancakes in your diner, you probably had no idea you were changing anyone's life. You were just doing what you thought was right. But that's how karma works, isn't it? Quietly, patiently, one act at a time. You gave us shelter for an hour. We want to give you shelter for the rest of your life. The house on Willow Lane is yours now. It's paid for in full. There's no mortgage. The utilities are covered for the first year. The fridge and pantry are stocked. We tried to make it feel like a place you could exhale in. The porch swing was Mia's idea. The blue paint was Ellie's. They wanted it to look like the kind of house they imagine you dreaming of when you were working late at the diner. We left our information with the realtor if you ever want to reach out. There's no obligation. You don't owe us anything. You already gave us more than we could ever repay. If you're comfortable, we'd love to see you. If not, please just accept this as a thank you note written in wood and brick and sunlight instead of ink. What goes around comes around, Sarah. It just took 10 years to find its way back to your front door. With all my love and gratitude, Lisa. By the time I finished reading, the words on the page had blurred into a mess of ink and tears. I pressed the letter against my chest and let out a sound that was somewhere between a sob and a laugh. My legs didn't feel steady enough to hold me up. Ruth stepped forward and gently took the letter from my hands. She read it quickly, her lips moving silently. When she got to the part about the house, her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, Sarah," she whispered. "Oh my gosh." I sank onto one of the kitchen chairs, the reality of it settling over me like a warm blanket. The house, the porch swing, the food in the fridge. The fact that someone, somewhere, had been carrying a promise to me for 10 years. I had spent so long believing that my kindness was just a small ripple lost in a big, uncaring ocean. I had never once considered that it might come back to me as a tidal wave of grace. I don't deserve this," I murmured, wiping my eyes. Karen, who had been standing quietly near the doorway, stepped forward. "If it means anything," she said softly, "I've read a lot of legal documents and a lot of notes like that, and I can tell you this much. They certainly think you do." I walked through the rest of the house in a daze. The smaller bedroom had a neatly made bed with a soft quilt and a reading lamp on the nightstand, as if it were ready for a guest. The larger bedroom, clearly meant to be mine, had a simple wooden bed frame, a dresser, a small desk by the window, and curtains in a cheerful floral print. There was a framed photo on the wall of a calm lake at sunset. In the closet, hangers waited for clothes I hadn't yet moved in. In the bathroom, there were fluffy towels and a basket of toiletries, shampoo, lotion, even the brand of soap I always bought when I wanted to feel a little bit fancy. In the linen closet, extra blankets and sheets were stacked neatly. Everywhere I looked, there were signs that someone had thought about what I might need. On the kitchen counter, beside the sink, there was a small notebook with "Welcome Home" written on the front. Inside, on the first page, was another short note in Lisa's handwriting. "Sarah, we tried to think of everything you might need, but if we missed anything, please buy it and send me the bill. I mean it. Consider this house our way of saying thank you for seeing us as more than just a burden. You helped us when it cost you something. Please let this pay some of that back. Love." L. Beneath that, there were lists of things in the house, notes about where extra blankets were, instructions for the thermostat, even the name of a nearby neighbor who is kind and helpful if you ever need anything. It was like someone had handed me not just a house, but a soft landing after a lifetime of hard floors. I stood in the middle of the living room and slowly turned in a circle, taking it all in. The furniture, the light, the quiet. For the first time in years, my shoulders didn't feel like they were trying to hold up the sky. I walked back out to the porch and sank down onto the swing. The chains creaked softly as I rocked back and forth. The street was quiet, the breeze cool against my damp cheeks. My fingers found the edge of the wooden seat, tracing the grain absent-mindedly. I thought about that day in the diner, Lisa's shaking hands, the way she'd said, "I don't have anything extra to give you," way I'd told her kindness wasn't a loan. I realized, sitting on that porch swing, that I had been wrong about one thing. Kindness does come back sometimes, not because we demand it, or because the universe owes us anything, but because people remember how we made them feel when they were at their lowest. I closed my eyes and pictured Lisa's face, older now, probably with a few lines at the corners of her eyes, maybe some streaks of gray in her hair. Imagined her daughters, Mia and Ellie, not the little girls in the rain-soaked booth, but young women, maybe in college, maybe working, maybe out in the world helping people the way their mother had learned to. I wondered if they were sitting somewhere right then, talking about whether I had found the house yet. I wondered if they were worrying that it wouldn't be enough, that it wouldn't fully express what that one meal had meant to them. I opened my eyes and let out a shaky breath. "Enough," I whispered to the empty street. "It's more than enough." That evening, after we finished the paperwork with Karen and she handed me the keys, I stood in the front yard and watched the sun sink low, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Ruth hugged me tight. "I still can't believe this," she said. "Only you, Sarah," I laughed. "You know, I used to walk through neighborhoods like this and tell myself, those houses are for other people," I said. "I never thought I'd be the one holding the keys." Ruth pulled back and looked at me. "Maybe you were always meant to be," she said softly. "It just took a while to get here." After she left, I stayed in the house alone for a while. I opened the windows to let in the evening air. I walked barefoot across the hardwood floors. I sat on the living room couch and listened to the quiet, the kind of quiet that isn't empty but full. Eventually, I picked up the letter again and read it one more time. This time, I paid attention to the last part, the mention that they had left their contact information with the realtor. I turned my phone over in my hands, staring at the black screen. My life had been shaped by so many goodbyes. I hadn't chosen my husband, my son leaving home, my old house, the diner as it used to be. This felt like a hello I didn't quite know how to handle. But I'm not a coward. Not anymore. I found the card Karen had given me and pulled out the small slip of paper with a phone number written on it. Lisa Harper, it said, in the same neat handwriting as the letter. My fingers trembled as I dialed. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. "Hello," a woman's voice answered. It was a little older than I remembered, but there was something unmistakably familiar about the tone. "Is this Lisa?" I asked. There was a pause. "Yes," she said cautiously. "Who's calling?" I swallowed hard. "Hi, Lisa," I said. "It's Sarah, from Betty's Diner." The sound she made was half gasp, half sob. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Sarah, is it really you? Did you get the house?" "I'm sitting in the living room right now," I said, voice thick. "I got your letter. I don't even know where to start." We both laughed through tears. For a moment, neither of us spoke. It was as if 10 years collapsed into a single, fragile instant. "You kept your promise," I said finally. "You told me you wouldn't forget." Her voice broke. "You kept me alive," she replied. "You just didn't know it." We talked for nearly an hour, catching up on the big things and the little things. She told me about her job at the hospital, about her husband, about how Mia wanted to go into social work and Ellie was studying art. I told her about the car accident, the medical bills, the eviction, the food bank, Tommy's army career, my sister's spare room. There were moments when we cried and moments when we laughed so hard we had to stop and catch our breath. At one point, she said, "The girls are dying to meet you. They're the ones who pushed hardest to find you. They're the ones who insisted on the porch swing." "I'd like that," I said, smiling even though she couldn't see it. "I'd like to meet them too." We set a date for the following weekend. She and her family would drive down from the city. They wanted to bring dinner, but I insisted on cooking. It felt right, somehow, to serve them in this house they had given me. The night before they came, I barely slept. I kept getting up to straighten the throw pillows, to check the fridge, to make sure everything was just right. It felt like getting ready for a holiday where the main gift had already been opened, but somehow the best part was still ahead. When they pulled up the next day, a silver SUV stopping at the curb, I stood on the porch, my hands twisting in front of me. Front door swung open, and I walked out onto the top step. Lisa stepped out of the passenger side first. Her hair was a little shorter than I remembered, with streaks of silver catching the sunlight. She wore a simple blouse and jeans, but she held herself with a confidence I hadn't seen in the young woman who once walked into my diner, drenched in rain and worry. Mia and Ellie climbed out next, taller now, young women instead of little girls. Mia had her mother's determined eyes. Ellie carried a sketchbook tucked under her arm, just like Lisa had said. For a second, none of us moved. Then, as if on some unspoken cue, Lisa walked toward me, her steps quickening as she crossed the lawn. I came down the steps to meet her halfway. We hugged like people who had known each other all their lives. In a way, I suppose we had. "Hi, sweetheart," I whispered, my voice shaking. "You made it," she laughed through tears. "No," she said, pulling back just enough to look at me. "We made it. Because of you." The girls joined in, wrapping their arms around us, creating a tangle of limbs and laughter and tears in the front yard of the house that kindness built. I felt a warmth there in that knot of people that I hadn't felt in a long time. We spent the day together, talking and eating and wandering through the house. I made roast chicken and mashed potatoes and green beans, the kind of meal my mother used to make on Sundays. We sat at the dining table and shared stories. "Do you remember the pancakes?" I asked Mia and Ellie at one point. Ellie nodded, smiling. "I remember thinking they were the best pancakes I'd ever had," she said. "I remember Mom crying. I didn't really understand why at the time." "I remember you," Mia added softly. "Not your face exactly, but the way you made us feel safe for a little while." Lisa squeezed my hand under the table. "They grew up on that story," she said. "Anytime someone helped us, anytime we helped someone, it always came back to the waitress at the diner." Later, we moved out to the porch. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the yard. The girls took turns on the swing. I sat in one of the chairs while Lisa leaned against the porch railing, looking out at the street. "You know," she said after a long silence, "there's one thing I didn't put in the letter." "What's that?" I asked. "Back when I was really struggling," she said, "there were nights when I thought about giving up. Not in the dramatic sense, not exactly, but I thought about just letting everything fall apart. Stop trying. Stop fighting. Just let life steamroll me. It would have been easier in some ways." She paused, her eyes shining. "But every time I got close to that edge," she continued, "I'd think about you. About a woman who had her own burdens, her own child, her own worries, and still made space for a stranger and her kids. I'd think, if she can keep going, if she can still be kind, then maybe I can too." She turned to look at me directly. "You didn't just feed us that day, Sarah. You gave me a reason to keep trying. This house, this life, my daughter's futures, they all exist because you decided to be kind when it wasn't easy." I swallowed past the lump in my throat. "I was just a waitress doing what felt right," I said quietly. she smiled. And that's exactly why it mattered so much. As the evening deepened and the porch lights came on, I sat back and listened to the soft murmur of the girls talking, the clink of dishes in the kitchen, the distant sound of a dog barking somewhere down the street. I felt a sense of peace settle over me, a deep, abiding calm I hadn't known I'd been missing. For so long, I had believed that my life was small and ordinary, that the only mark I'd leave on the world would be coffee rings on counters and worn spots on the diner floor. I never imagined that a single decision on a rainy afternoon could ripple outward into something this big, this beautiful. But that's the quiet power of good karma. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand recognition. It moves through lives in invisible lines, connecting moments and people in ways we may never fully see. Sometimes, it means a stranger picks up your grocery tab when you're counting pennies at the checkout. Sometimes, it means someone leaves an extra 20 on the table after a meal because they know the waitress is scraping by. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it means that the kindness you extend to someone at their lowest point finds its way back to you years later in the form of a front porch, a full pantry, a letter full of gratitude, and a house key that fits perfectly into your shaky hand. I still volunteer at the food bank. I still help people when I can. The only difference now is that when I hand a woman a box of pasta or a bag of rice, I can tell her with complete honesty, you never know how this story is going to turn out. It's not over yet. Sometimes, when the weather is nice, I sit on my porch swing with a cup of coffee and watch the world go by. Neighbors wave. Kids ride their bikes. Dogs tug their leashes. The sun warms my face, and the breeze carries the faint scent of the flowers planted under my windows. And every now and then, when a car slows down on Willow Lane and someone glances up at my little blue house with the white trim and the red door, I wonder if they think, what a lovely place. Whoever lives there must be very lucky. They're not wrong, but it isn't luck, not really. It's what happens when what goes around finally comes around. And if you're listening to this, wondering if your small act of kindness matters, let me leave you with this. On a rainy day in a tired little diner, I handed over a crumpled $20 bill and a plate of pancakes. 10 years later, I walked through the front door of my dream home, built on the foundation of that moment. So go ahead, hold the door open, pay for the coffee, listen to the story, offer the kind word, plant the seed. You never know when karma is quietly writing your own letter back